Hello everyone, and this video is gonna be a little bit different from something I normally do. It says that there is a quest queued up, but I'm not going to be taking it. I mostly just have it there so I can go through all of the different menus faster without having to worry about the quick save mechanic. Sometimes it's really nice, but for something like this, it just gets in the way. So this video is more designed for new players, or maybe you're a veteran player and there's something that you feel like you're missing. These are just some general tricks and or tips to think about while you're playing the game. For the big main thing I have to talk about is when you're hunting a monster and you're new to the game, don't be fixated on the clock. The clock is the timer in the top left corner when you are hunting a monster or doing any quests, or most quests aside from tours, like the one in the top left corner of my screen. When you are hunting a monster, especially for the first time, it's okay to take it slow. It's okay to just run around it or kite it out as best you can. Take hits every now and then when you can, but really try to learn the ins and outs of a monster. If people are similar to games like MOBAs, like maybe League of Legends, there's a phrase that people say where they call it limit testing. Another way you could possibly play is you just kind of go crazy hard on the monster. You just go as aggro as you can, and you can learn that way too. I know that works well for some people, but for the most part, I would recommend just running around the monster, looking at its moves, trying to get a general idea of when your openings are. This is more especially tailored towards the end game. Maybe you're just playing Rise, or maybe you're playing Sunbreak and you're having difficulty with the pacing of the game. It's okay to take it slow. It's okay to just watch the monster do what it does. Another thing I would like to bring up, and this is another very big point, is don't worry about what's the strongest weapon. Don't worry about what weapon you think is the most OP. Obviously, if that's something that you enjoy looking for in games, by all means, you're able to do so. I'm not saying you can't, but I highly recommend picking a weapon that you think you would enjoy or you think looks the coolest. I like to play Gunlance the most. I don't have very many Gunlances because the one I like to use is the Basil Pride, which is Seething Basil Geese's Gunlance, which is just a blast weapon. If you like the Greatsword, go for Greatswords. If you like Sword and Shield, go for Sword and Shield. No weapon is truly bad in Monster Hunter. Some have higher skill floors than others, and that's perfectly okay. They might take a little bit more to learn, but if you really like the weapon, you'll be more invested in learning the mechanics of said weapon. Next, the next thing I want to talk about is don't be afraid to take the game slow in general. It's okay to sit and farm a monster if you really like it. Maybe you don't want to rush through the story, or maybe you just want to do quests at a leisurely pace. That's perfectly okay. A lot of people, especially veterans, kind of rush to endgame because they more or less know the general gist of a Monster Hunter game. The main focus point is obviously hunt the big monsters, kill the big monsters, farm the big monsters' weapons and armor, and just make bigger and better builds as the game goes on. Another thing that I feel I should bring up is element isn't important for every weapon, but for some weapons it's always important, as well as if you are using a weapon that isn't necessarily great with element, it's okay to build more than one version of the weapon. For example, great swords necessarily aren't what you want to be building element with, at least for the more popular build, which is the big heavy hits or crit draw builds. So most of the time you just go for the biggest attack number that you see, and everything else kind of just comes secondary, and you think about as a ladder option. But if you really like a weapon or you really like a monster and you want to use that monster's weapon, it's okay to build something with element. It's okay to go for something that has more element than or is more element focused, then not. It's perfectly okay, just build whatever you want and use whatever you want. Obviously, some things are better than others for certain aspects, like certain full sets are better than not, but it's okay. Another thing to talk about is when people first get introduced to Monster Hunter, they get bombarded by things of highest damage or highest crit rate, use this build, use that build. But my general idea of when you start a new Monster Hunter game, even if you're a veteran, build more for comfort over damage. It helps you learn new monsters easier, it helps you learn the pacing of the game easier in general. That doesn't mean you can't build for damage if you don't want to, but it's perfectly okay to go for like a full set, which is the entire armor set of a specific monster, and just roll with that for a while. It's perfectly okay to do so. If you want to do mix and match builds, which are called mixed sets, then you could do that if you really wanted to, but sometimes that takes a little bit more of a knowledge of the skills in general, or the general pacing of the game, or the game in general. It's okay to not have everything in the game. Certain item or certain builds will come to you as you play. You'll get better at theory crafting, you'll get better at general skill acknowledgement and what's more important than what isn't. But if you don't have a certain piece of equipment, it's okay. You can go farm it if you want. If you really don't like the monster, or you feel like you'd be better off spending your time on something else, don't feel like you need to farm anything and everything in the game. If you want to, if you're a hardcore completionist, then you can go for it if you really want to. Something I like to do when I get towards the end game of Monster Hunter and I feel like I've done a lot is I'll just farm uh, every weapon and every piece of equipment from a specific monster. So a good instance of this would be Basilgeuse. I really like the monster since its integration into the game from World and Iceborne. So I would make both regular Basilgeuse and Seething Basilgeuse equipment. I would max out all of the weapons for Basilgeuse. Basilgeuse does not have a weapon for every category, unfortunately, but that's just something you could think about, or a specific endgame goal that you could do. Another thing to talk about for new players is that the Meowcenaries, the Meowcenaries and the Argosy, which is the farm in this game, try to max these out as much as you can. I wouldn't say necessarily rush it, but these things do make a big difference. There are certain pieces of equipment or certain weapons that you can't get without things from these two side I don't know if I'd call them mini games, but these side things. Uh, they get the Meowcenaries give you monster materials as well as other things. Like if you go for this, as you can see, the one of the icons is shiny. This means that you have a higher chance of getting rare pieces of items from the bone pile, which is what that shiny icon is. It is a bone pile with a higher rarity chance. Sometimes there's monsters, sometimes it's all monsters, sometimes it's no monsters at all, sometimes it's a mix. It's perfectly okay. It's perfectly okay to go for just one or the other. Sometimes you need more ore, sometimes you need more bones, sometimes you need more plants or fish. Maybe you just need monster materials. This is a really good way to go about getting those. It's just a little extra farm thing on the side to think about. And as I said earlier, the Argosy, or as most Monster Hunter veterans call it, is the farm. This is just a way to get extra items or materials. As you can see, this gives me like honey, a demon drug, a piece of ore that is probably for selling. It also gives me some more honey, it gives me a piece of monster materials, it gives me 3 barrels, it gives me some file coatings for the bow, and it gives me another piece of ore that is also probably for selling. Getting all 3 slots of the farm or the Argosy is pretty important, I would say, just because it gives you a little bit of extra farm stuff up front, and it makes the grind a little bit easier. The last thing I would say that is a big part of Monster Hunter that many people overlook, especially new players, is the general store, or in this game it's called the market in general. If you're low on money, there are things you can sell from your item box. Maybe you don't need it, or maybe more specifically, monster parts. Monster parts are good things to sell if you don't feel like you're going to use it or you have an overabundance. Like for this, I have 30 Legambi Pelt Pluses. I'm not going to be using all those more than likely, so I would sell maybe not all 30, but I would sell around 15 to 20 just to give me a little bit of extra boost in money. Some monster materials are worth more than others. Obviously, the higher tier the monster in terms of difficulty, the more often than not, the higher the price of the monster material, as well as going from low rank to high rank to master rank or G rank, the more expensive monster parts get as well. So as you can see, the Great Azuchi Grind Tail, which is a master or G rank tail from Great Azuchi, is worth 4,440, whereas the regular Great Azuchi tail, which is from low rank and high rank, is only 420. That is because this is from Master Rank and G rank, which is a harder difficulty of the game, versus low rank and high rank, which is a easier version of the game. It's the general store also has a lot of good things to buy. Like you can buy regular potions, so you can make mega potions a little bit easier. There's life powder to heal you and your NPC allies and your palamutes and palicos. It also helps you heal your teammates if you're playing multiplayer. You could buy antidotes, you could buy barrels, you could buy barrel bombs, you could buy tranq bombs. You can even buy ammunition if you're using a ranged weapon. There's a lot of things you could do and buy with the stuff you get from the general store. There's also the melting pot, but I'd say that's more for a little bit more integrated players because that stuff can be a little bit confusing or it can be a little bit harder to navigate. That's really about it for this. I hope these little tips help you in your start and or your end game grind of Monster Hunter. Most veterans probably know all this. It's kind of second nature, but for new players, there's a lot of stuff to kind of digest. There's a lot of things to do. And I know a lot of people kind of get their general game plan overruled by what's meta or what's most popular. So I hope this helps you out in the long run, or maybe even just the short term. I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, or night, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.